Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics here to introduce several projects from the Countdown to Christmas by Janet Nesbitt. She's a designer for Henry Glass. Love her designs, and as you can see, we just kept going. What's on set with me? We have the quilts, coordinating beautiful table runner. It's a good size. I love that. We've got a placemat here, both on my left and my right, and there's two more. We just ran out of space for that, as well as some beautiful coordinating napkins. You know, I love when we can coordinate our home with the same collection. There's just a continuity that as you travel from the dining room, maybe over to the room where the Christmas tree is, maybe there's the quilt there. I love that continuity of the same look throughout. Just really provides it's a reinforcement, a comfort. So what I want to do here, there's really three elements that we use to make the various projects. In the placemats, there's just the star block, and then of course there's the component off to the right where we have our little silverware holder. But for the table runner and for the quilt, we have the star block, which of course is in our placemats, as well as the Christmas tree block, and we're calling this an ornament block. I want to show you some of the basics of putting together each of the three blocks. We'll have one video broken out in 3 sections where I'm showing you really how easy and approachable this is. So even if you normally are focused on applique and patchwork and piecing isn't your favorite, or maybe you're brand new or fairly new to the world of quilting, welcome. I'm so happy you're watching this video. Subscribe if you haven't already done that. There's so much content for you, both already previously recorded and much to come in the future as well, and you don't want to miss out. You want to be all part of that. So I'll start off with this block here, the star block, because if you're only going to be picking up the placemat kit, of course we have kits available, that's the only block you need to know how to do. And these others will come after that. What we'll do is one video broken up kind of in 3 sections. Again, the star block, the tree, and then the ornament. And if you're like, I'm not, you know, I really know how to do this, but I'd like to get some pointers on the tree block, you can just zoom to that part of our video. So I'll just move this off to the side. And really, you know what, I actually won't put that completely off to the side. Let's just look at this block and we'll break it down. You can see there's basically 4 quadrants. These are squares and these are squares. So already, how easy is that? That's a square and that's a square. And this is simply a half square triangle. So let's talk about a half square triangle and how easy they are to make, and I'll give you an option of making star singles faster and with more accuracy, all things that we like to hear, right? So let me just bring out some of the things that I've prepared in advance for you. The traditional way to make a half square triangle is by placing 2 fabrics right sides together, and we draw the line from corner to corner, and we sew on either side. And I have a nice little reminder note. We like to, and the way we wrote our pattern is we like to slightly oversize our half square triangles and then be able to trim those up. And I'm going to grab a spinning mat for us, because anytime I square up a block, it's really lovely when we can do not ever lift that block and we rotate that fabric around ourselves. So hopefully you can see we've stitched a 1/4 inch on either side. Now we will grab a straight edge of any ruler you've got and we'll cut right on that line. And let's just press to the dark. I'm just pressing that out of habit. I believe in your pattern there are some very specific pressing instructions depending on which color you're using to increase how flat and interlocked our blocks are. Again, you'll be referring to that for whether you're going to press the light or press the dark. Just by default, I'm kind of showing you the mechanics of how half square triangles go together. It will be the same process whether you're pressing to the green or to the cream. This is slightly oversized, and of course that one is as well. Important that we square this up to 3.5. Creative grid. We have our nice beautiful line. You could use whatever ruler you have, but I always love using a mission specific ruler where I am now able to put my ruler right on my diagonal, and I'm going to bias my ruler so that I have the opportunity to trim up on all 4 sides. Don't scoot that in that ruler and just try to trim up 2 sides. It's far more accurate when we can trim on all 4 sides. And my favorite part about the spinning mat is I don't ever have to move my fabric. We simply maneuver around our fabric. If I didn't have that, I would be picking that up, some cutting here. I've seen people cut under their arm, just crazy stuff. Please don't do that. So easy to nick your arm, and of course we all know how sharp these blades are, especially if you've just put a brand new blade in your rotary cutter, and you do want to do that anytime you're doing patchwork. So that is how we make our half square triangle. And I have another one to square up real quick. And then we're going to go into, all right, now that we've made our half square triangles, how do we put this block together? Very straightforward. I'm going to clean that off, get a fresh look at that. Sometimes that happens, maybe you bump the block or your view gets cluttered because of that little bit of trim that's kind of cluttering your mat. And there, we've got 2 of them now. Now I know where we need to be. Okay, I prepared the other ones in advance. So let's just look and see what we've got so far. We know that, this is something I want to point out. Let me bring out the elements real quick, and I can explain further what I was going to say here. The arrangement of, obviously here in this one, we have the greens opposite and the reds opposite. Which one is in which corner? Maybe you like the numbers over in that corner. That's up to you. So in this instance, when we get ready to lay this out, we know these will be opposite. And we will have our fabrics here, and this in the corner. And in order to make our star here, there, and there. And you know, don't get stressed out about the fact that the trees are upside down or going sideways. This is all just whimsical and fun. Now, before I sew that together, I want to give you an option. I mentioned that, and I kind of jumped ahead. Star singles. Star singles are awesome, and that's why they're sitting on this here. When you use star singles, instead of making 2 half square triangles at the same time, you make 8 half square triangles all at the same time, and you do not have to square up. I love that. I love that. So one sheet will produce 8 half square triangles. In this instance, if you are going to be purchasing the placemat kit, since you're making 2 half square triangles, you will use 1 sheet here because you'll make 2 there, and for 4 placemats, that's a total of 8. So each one of those would be taking 1 of these fabrics and 1 of these fabrics to make a total of 8. So here, let's just look at what we have. Star singles are based on the finished size of the half square triangle. They're not based on the finished size of the block, but they're based on the finished size of this. We know if we trim that up to 3.5, this is going to be sewn into the project at a total of 3 inches. So the papers tell us exactly what to do. Cutting 8-inch squares of fabric, placing them right side together, and then we're sewing on our dash lines, stopping and pivoting on our dark circles, and cutting on our solid lines. You're going to pin everything together kind of here in your gaps. If you only wanted to make 4 half square triangles for any reason, let's say you're going to be doing the table runner, for example, where I only really need to have, I need less than that. I don't need 8 of those. You can always cut this paper in half, and now you're making 4 half square triangles. This is just an option for you. If you have struggled with half square triangles, or you like sewing on the paper instead of the traditional way and having to square up, we've sewn that ahead of time. This is what this would look like. I cut 1 in half. We sewed on our dash line with a much shortened stitch length, and then that's what that's going to look like. And then we cut on our solid line. So let me just go do that. And we're going to take a measurement check, and we can see just how accurate these are. Some people ask me, when you make half square triangles, what's your preferred method? You're looking at it because I love that it's a little bit quicker, more precise, and I'm not having to square that up later because I didn't oversize it. These just produce the exact size half square triangles that I'm looking for. So we'll cut on our diagonal, and then we'll take a measurement check after we remove the paper. The shortened stitch length not only adds more stability on this bias, but it also perforates the paper so that when we're removing the paper, it comes out more easily and it doesn't unsettle the stitches that you've added. And let's press, and then we'll take a measurement check. I'm always bragging about the accuracy. Star singles come in a variety of sizes, all the way from 1 inch all the way up to, I think, 3.5 is the biggest, I think. We can check that out on the website if you're interested in that. And we'll just take a measurement check, and it is absolutely perfect. You can see now why that is my favorite method. 8 at a time with absolute precision and no squaring up. But again, just an option to you. Once you've decided on whether you're going to do the traditional half square triangles or you pick up those star singles, be sure to lay out your block. Again, if you prefer to have the numbers up there, maybe you just like the orientation of that, do whatever you want with that. Or maybe you want to switch these, right? We could switch anything up. You just obviously want the reds opposite and the greens opposite of one another. Laying this out, of course, we will be placing this right side together. And I would sew that 1/4 inch from this side because that seam is down. And here, I would actually sew from this side. And I'll just flip this over so you can see that. Pressing seams open at this point. We keep doing that. So you'll complete that until you have this quadrant. And then as we sewed our units together, again, pressing seams open. All right, you see the mechanics of how that block goes together, very straightforward. I'm going to clear off the table just a bit and get ready to talk us through our tutorial on how to make our tree block. Of course, if you're picking up that placemat kit, the instructions for the sashing, that background, the pocket will all, of course, be included in your kit there. This is more just about how do we make those blocks that are really making up the project, whether it's the table runner, the placemats, or the quilt. All right, I'll be back in just a moment and we'll get going on our Christmas tree block. So we're moving on to our tree block. This is what it looks like. Of course, it's in the table runner. It's in the quilt plenty of times. Let me just move this so you're kind of seeing how it's constructed, very manageable. And we'll do the very top of that tree together. I'll show you the back of this so you know where we're going. Just like that. We'll make the very top, and we keep pressing toward our outside, away from our bulk of our seams. And then when all of those rows are sewn together, and we'll sew one of those together, we'll press all of the seams open. Very straightforward. I'm going to give you an option of how to do something called snowballing the corner. Let me just scoot this up real quick so I have a little bit of space to work in. Maybe I'll just push that up there for the moment. Here, notice everything's got stickers on it. Why? Because as we look at this, let me just bring that back out. You can see this is cut to a different size, and this is cut to a different size, and this is cut to a different size. Each of those has to be in that location. So I find it helpful to just label those. When you cut those two, put that little stack over, and that could be your letter H, and same with your letter B. It just makes it a little bit easier to assemble the block, and you're not having to remeasure your shapes to say, is that the one that fits? You don't. It just helps you move through that a little bit quicker. All right, with our red fabric and with our letter B, for just what we're using today, your first option is the way I learned how to make a flying geese block. That's what we're doing right here, is just making a flying geese block. The way I learned that was to cut a rectangle of the main fabric, which is of course the red, and then to get two of the fabrics that were basically this height but a square, and you have two of them, and you place one here and sew on the line and flip, and then you would draw the line and again sew on the line and flip and trim. I'm going to give you an option. I'm going to take a traditional approach over on this one, and then I'm going to give you an option for the second one that we add to make our flying geese unit. Before I trim, I do press to the outside to confirm that basically the footprint has not changed. I just happen to add a cream fabric up in that corner. If you're not happy with what that looks like, or maybe the fabric shifted, go ahead and seam rip and try again before you proceed with trimming, because obviously then you're not going to go back. I could absolutely draw that line, place that here, so on that line, and again, flip to the outside, press the outside, and then trim, and the block is done. Some people really just don't like drawing that line. If that's you, I'm going to place this on here. I have a tool called the corner clipper by Creative Grid. We already know that this is the part, right, that once we sew on the line and we press this to the outside, that's going to be cut away. Well, Creative Grid realized, hey, there may be an interest in people who would like to skip that step. As I lay the corner clipper on, notice it's as if it drew the line for me. It's corner to corner. Now I trim. I'm going to pin, and we'll sew 1/4 inch. Put that there. And press to the outside. See, it's another way of getting there. Always want to offer you options, and this is nothing more than an option. Let's trim that just a touch. So that is the top portion of our tree. Let me just bring that down. So here on either end. Let's sew that together. I want to get that top row done and sew the top row to the second row, and just give you some pointers with that. Here, as I place the right side together, I need to decide, am I going to sew on this side, or should I flip it over and sew on this side? Knowing that that seam is going down and my motion of travel through my sewing machine is this direction, I will definitely sew this from this side to trap that seam. just like we saw on the sample block, we're consistently pressing away from the bulk of that, because as I open this up, look how this seam is already saying, do not even, please don't press me this direction. It's saying, path of least resistance. This is a law of nature, that things want to flow in the path of least resistance. And so we will comply with that request. It's not always that way. Sometimes we do have to go a little bit against the desire of a seam for whatever reason, interlocking, the way a block goes together. But in this instance, we'll absolutely comply with that. Over on the other side, right side together, once again, I'm going to evaluate that. Do I sew from this side, or do I want to sew from that side? Again, if I sew with this on top, this is going to roll back on me potentially as the presser foot's approaching. I just have to deal with this. So on this instance, I will be sewing from this side, and that seam is going this direction, and our same direction of travel. When you sew your rows together, sometimes when we make quilt blocks together, we can get interlocking seams. We have that kind of lock, maybe on making a pinwheel or sewing rows together. But in this instance, notice we have none of that. So normally I do not pin just left to right, and I'm not going to pin that way here either. But I will pin there in that row. Obviously the rows need to be the same length. If they're not, something went a little bit off kilter, and that needs to be reconciled and figured out what happened there. Maybe it took too short or too great of a seam allowance. But when they're like this, and those are the same height, I just want this to stack right on top of itself. I'll put a pin right in the middle here. And let's sew. I don't think there's an advantage to one side or the other. So we will press open. We saw that on the back of our block. Warming a seam before you press. I used to just try to get the seam open, and was met with resistance at times. These seams want to just lay together. Warming them up in advance with just a touch of the iron makes them a little more pliable than when they are cold. We'll get that open. And once you start and get that open, the iron generally can move right through that. Still, you can see these seams do not like being open. They want to be closed. There's bulk on both sides. So you might need to let the iron sit there just a little bit longer to get those pressed open. I'll let that iron sit there for just a bit. I encourage you to, as we look at this, we can see we have 2, 4, 6. Don't just add the next row to that. You want to sew in groups of 2. This is together, this is together, this is together, and then start joining those up. I've learned that the hard way. I would just like, okay, I'm going to add on, and for whatever reason, it starts this nice turn. Okay, not nice, turn, and my block is just a little bit wonky. So that's how we put together the Christmas tree block in our groups of 2, groups of 2, groups of 2, so that all together, all seams open. And as we can see here, we've got some side sashing here that we have. Those are coming on first, and pressing definitely toward your sashing. We have all of these seams just press to that sashing. We put the upper portion sashing strip on, and of course pressing toward that as well. And now that portion of our project, whether it's the table runner or the tree, is done. All right, we're moving right along. I'll clean up one more time and we'll go right into making the ornament block on our projects. Okay, we're back to finish up with our ornament block. And one thing I wanted to mention to you, it's very noticeable. This is the table runner, of course, this is the quilt. Notice how the ornament, let me just show this to you so you can see that. The ornament is much larger in the quilt. So in order for the table runner to be the appropriate size for a table, but still be able to have a beautiful border, we brought down the size of both the ornament as well as the Christmas tree. Here on our Christmas tree, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. And on our table runner, we have 4. So just know that if you are going to be getting perhaps the quilt as well as the table runner, same approach to what we're doing, different measurements. So just wanted to throw that out there. This block might look a little bit intimidating. Not to worry. As we break this down, you'll see this is very, very doable and far simpler than anyone might anticipate. By the way, the quilt, we offer a backing on that. That's the fabric, of course, still from Janet's beautiful Countdown to Christmas collection. If you want to grab that, hopefully by the time you're watching this, hopefully there'll still be some kits available. Okay, so as we examine this, look at this right up here. That's a flying geese unit. We know all about flying geese units. And of course, the center portion here, actually, let's just start there, is just 3 rectangles. So let me just bring that out and you can see how straightforward that is. We just have 1, 2, and 3. Sew those together. You're pressing toward the red. And then once you have that, we'll bring out 4 of these squares. And now you have that option. These are the 4 squares. Of course, you could draw the line or use the corner clipper. We talked about that in the Christmas tree block. Whatever that is, you'll sew on that. You'll sew, and let's press to the outside and trim. And you can see how quickly this block, we can start to unpack it and see that this is very approachable. Let me just trim those up real quick. A spinning mat would be a great tool. I think I had that on here previously and probably took it off just for limited space. But it's always nice when we can just spin around as we're trimming all 4 corners or maybe trimming or squaring up. Let me press that again to the outside. And now we really have the center portion of our ornament. Once we have that here, we can see that the sides will come into play, placing those right sides together. And I can make a decision. Do I want to sew on this side? And I will. I love sewing on a side where there's no seams. But when I have a seam on the bottom, especially this seam, and I'm traveling through my machine, every now and again, the feed dogs, the presser foot, the contact over the friction makes that seam roll back and it traps that. And now I don't have a nice flat quilt block. If I have my seams on the top, they're in my view and I can take care of them and make sure nothing's rolling back as I am sewing the 1/4 inch seam. So let's press in the corners, pin in the corners. And I've got a seam guide on my machine that's going to help me sew a nice true 1/4 inch. I've had that, of course, the whole time. And we'll sew Okay, we all know where that seam's going to go, don't we? There's a lot going on here. So of course, when I open that, it automatically is just like going that way. And like, that's a good idea. I agree. Let's do that. And we'll press to the outside. And of course, do the same on the opposite. I will just go do that real quick. And when I come back, we'll work on the upper portion of the block, and then just the top and the bottom are identical, and then you're just sewing those 3 sections together. All right, let me get that sewn, and we'll proceed on to the upper portion of our ornament. Once the middle portion of the ornament is done, we'll work on the top and the bottom. They're identical, just reflected. Just like we learned before, we make these little flying geese units. We start off with our rectangle. You have your 2 squares. I drew the line. It's so small, I wouldn't mess with the corner clipper. Sew on the line, flip, trim. Same on this one. You have your flying geese unit. We went over that before when we were doing our Christmas trees. This portion is below that. Sewing right side together and pressing down. And then you'll have the 2 sides being sewn on here. Just move that a little bit out of the way. And now we'll have our top row done. I'll just show you how that was pressed. And that's the top and bottom row. You repeat that, as I mentioned, here on the top, and of course that on the bottom. Placing this right side together, notice before I do that, there are no interlocking seams. There's no place where the exact seam and the exact location are trying to meet up. In that instance, you'll place right side together, pin, pin, and then any seams you think that might want to roll on you when you sew, just pin on the diagonals. Sew a 1/4 inch seam, press open, repeat that on the bottom, and you have an ornament block. And then of course the sashing will come in, side pieces will be first, pressing toward that, and then your upper sashing pressing toward that as well. And now you have an ornament block. So you can see really, when you look at the projects, they can visually be a little bit intimidating. And as we break it down, you can see this is absolutely doable. So thank you for giving me part of your day to show you these 3 different blocks that make up the projects. Be sure to pick up those kits, always in limited supply. And if you haven't already done that, be sure to subscribe. So much more coming your way. I'll see you soon on another Shabby video.